What's up, monkeys? How's everybody doing today? We're going to be going over a tier list today. We're going to be talking about, what is it, like 6 different tiers? Where each gun falls in that tier, what you should have on that gun, and then in the end, I'm going to show you what I think you should run on your loadout. Let's get right into it. So in first we have S tier. This is just the best weapon. Like, I just decided to do one weapon because I think it's the only gun that you should be running, and that of course is the core. Everyone should know this already. High DPS, good fall off start range, good weak spot damage, good damage to rivals, and everything. On this you should be running hollow stock. Time to equip speed and time to ADS is always the best, even if it's just a small number. EM charge rounds because of course damage to rivals, always. And then rapid cycler for more fire rate. Alright, that's the only S tier weapon, so that is the highest rated weapon in the game. I would suggest you always have this on. Next tier is A+. One of the weapons is PDW. Now this is only used for PvE. This is a PvE gun. Right now the meta is to have a PvE weapon. This is the best option for one. You run Xenotoxin, more damage to monsters, and you run high caliber, which is more damage. That way you can do more mob kills per clip. I would highly suggest this weapon on your loadout because it's a good PvE weapon. Next we have Advocate. This is also the other A+ weapon. On this you can run Extended Mag or Piercing. If you're not planning on getting a PvE weapon, I would highly suggest Piercing. If you are going to get a PvE weapon, run Extended Mag because it's just going to be better for PvP. And then I would also suggest Heavy Stock because this thing has a little bit of kick. Not too much, so if you want, you can run Light Stock. Actually, no, go Light Stock. Light Stock or Heavy Stock doesn't matter, really. And then Rapid Cycler is the only option for this attachment. Of course, no sight. A lot of guns you don't use sights on. Alright, that's it for the A+ tier. Now we're going to go ahead and go on to A tier, which is Scrapper. Now, the Scrapper is an option for your PvP weapon, so if you really don't like the core, please use the Scrapper. This is actually, it does more DPS than the core, so if you prefer to get really close to your opponent, then this will actually be a better option for you. That's why it's an A tier weapon. A tier weapons are basically like, you can use them, they're like secondary options for the higher tier. On this you want Heavy Handle, better recoil for the hard recoil gun, and then Quicksilver. No body attachment because the body attachments reduce pretty much all the good stuff that you'd want. Next A tier weapon is the Basilisk. This is the option for your 500. So if you don't like the Advocate or any of the 500 options I will show you, this is probably the best second option for 500. You want heavy battery, of course. You also want ergonomic grip. You can run light stock if you prefer the movement speed, but I would suggest ergo grip. And then heavy frame or capacitor. You want heavy frame if you want the fire rate. You want capacitor if you want to chunk more. Alright, that's it for the Basilisk. Next A tier weapon is the Karma. Now the only reason why this is a lower tier, because it's still great, is because it is 800 credits. With the new credit system, it's a little bit harder to get 800, so you'd have to save it for longer or it'd be later in the game where you get it. So it makes it a little bit less valuable, but it's still a great gun. If you want to run an 800, I would highly suggest this for PvP. This is the best 800 for PvP by far. You always want magnetic slabs. The other ones are just pointless. Improved 4x. I don't really see a point to running the 8x. It doesn't. It's too zoomed. Plus this reduces time to ADS. And then ergo stock, because that's a lot of time to equip speed down. That's it for the Karma. Now we have Gorgon. This is the other option of a PvE weapon. The PDW does 100 more DPS to mobs than the Gorgon. But if you prefer the Gorgon over it, then go ahead and use it. On this, of course, you want Burn Modular because it's a PvE weapon. Charge Capacitor because spin up time. And Ergo Grip because equip speed. Alright, that's it for the A tier weapons. Now we're moving on to B tier. These are still decent options, but the reason why they're low is because they just have better counterparts. First example I will give you is a Lacerator. So Lacerator, the core has just a little bit less fall off start range, which is where like the damage will start to drop down. But it has way more DPS. Like we got 247, and then we got the core, which is 358, so way less. And the Lacerator's recoil is harder to control. But on this, either stock whatever you're feeling to use, heavy or light. And then Quicksilver, of course. I know some people like to run extended mag, but you always want damage to rivals. Like, look at that, 20% more, of course. And then Rapid Slicer, because DPS. This is the option if you don't like the core or the scrapper, but I would highly suggest you run the core over it, and if you want to face shove, then run the scrapper. Probably don't run the Lacerator unless you really like it. Next B tier weapon is the Brute. Brute's the same kind of thing with the Advocate. It does a little bit more DPS, but the fall off start range is half. So this thing is only used for way closer range. If you do like closer range, then this will probably be a slight better option, but I would still suggest the Advocate. On this you want Sleek Stock because it doesn't have hard recoil to control, so you want the equip speed. Heavy Battery because you want to fire off more damage per mag. And Barrel Coils because it's really the only option. The other ones reduce DPS. And this one increases range a little bit. That's why you see a little 500 extra. So that's another B tier gun. Next we have Detonator. Now this is probably like a decent choice if you like to clear Warden Alpha. I would say it's probably the best Warden Alpha. Maybe Karma. Karma can compete with it because you can just stay in distance with Karma. But on the Detonator you want to run Magnetic Magazine, faster reload time. The other one you don't want because if you're using it for PvP at all, you don't want the fuse to like not explode. Next we have Rapid Launcher, DPS, always. Alright, that's it for B tier. Now we're moving on to slightly lower tier. Now you can really still use these if you like them, but I wouldn't suggest them at all. I would say just use a better option, and I'll tell you the better option. First we have the Arbiter. This is basically just a worse Basilisk. If you can really land your shots with it, it'll be more damage per second than the Basilisk, but I highly doubt you're going to hit every single shot with it. On this you want Aerodynamic Scope, Ergonomic Stock, Extended Container, and Spring Assisted Bolt. Alright. And like I said, I would suggest running the Basilisk over it. If you're going to run a sniper at all, run the Basilisk. Next we have his Comrade. This gun just isn't good. If they're in a flight suit or anything, it won't be good. Even if they're on the ground, it's not that great. But if you really want to run it, TNT rockets are the best way to go. Always have more AoE. Booster chamber for projectile speed. This one's just like tighter rib, doesn't really help because it makes the burst interval longer. And then lightweight stock because equip time. But if I was going to use that, I would probably say Scrapper's a better option because both guns you're going to be shoving close, but the Scrapper you can actually hit someone in the air. So just use the Scrapper over it. And it's 300 less. Next we have is Manticore. Now this gun's still okay. I just don't think it's as good because the whole point of the Advocate is you can stay a little bit distance. This gun you still have to face shove. But if you're going to run it, still run Bundle Ejector, Mercury Infuse of course, and Spring Stock. But just use any other 500. Please, this gun isn't really that great. Next we have a Shatter Gun. This gun is usable. I wouldn't say it's viable, but it's usable. So if you want to use it, run Quicksilver and run Reactive Lever. Do not run a sight because it'll make it so your ADS is awkward. And it still kind of shreds if you like it. But if I was to suggest anything over it, it'd be the Manticore, and I already suggested other stuff over the Manticore, so you can see why it's like a little bit lower. And then you got Guarantee. Now this gun is the best PvE weapon for Laser Drill. You will not find a better weapon for it. Now that is with Chain Reaction, Overclocked, and Light Stock only. It doesn't do as good without Chain Reaction. You want this in like casual games where you're trying to climb ranking because it'll be so good for Laser Drill and you can just solo Laser Drill. For pro games or for any high rank games, I wouldn't suggest running this at all because most of the time you'll just have a couple people in Laser Drill and 2 people is enough to fully clear a Laser Drill. You don't need a special weapon to do it. But this is the best PvE weapon in the game if you can get up to it. I wouldn't recommend trying to save up 800 just to get a guarantee, but if you want to, go ahead and run this. Alright, that's it for the C tier. Now we have the F tier, and I'm not really going to go over what you run, but I'm just going to tell you what's in it. We have the Fletchit gun. It's just a worse version of the Scrapper, or the Core, or the PDW. And it's worse for PvE than the PDW is. Bolty, which is just a worse version of an Arbiter, really, because it also has projectile speed, which means that it's not a hit scan weapon like the Basilisk is a hit scan. So when you shoot, it'll immediately go to them. This is not a hit scan. This is not a hit scan. Bolty and Arbiter aren't hit scan. So if you're going to run a projectile gun, just run the Arbiter over the Bolty. Next we have this long shot. Same thing. It's projectile. It's the same damage as the Basilisk. don't run it. Just don't. Next is Phasic. Same thing. Just a worse 500. You don't want to run it at all. It doesn't do as good as any other 500 does. Next is Maelstrom. It's a pretty fun meme gun because it's pretty bad, but it got a little bit of a buff. I think it does a little bit more damage. Yeah, it's got some DPS, so. But I would just suggest a Shattergun over it if you're going to go for a shotgun. Shattergun's even more fun to use. Next is Haze. Haze is it's decent in some situations. The reason it's F tier is because I wouldn't waste 800 on a Haze when you can spend 800 on a Karma or a Detonator or a Guarantee. You know, like there's no real reason. Next we have is Carla. Carla is just a worse version of the Detonator. It's 324 DPS. It shoots one shot at a time. It's basically got the same kind of thing as, yeah, look at that. Like 700 DPS compared to what, 324? Yeah, 324. Like, look at, that's like half the DPS. You just don't run it. And last but not least is Zeus Beam. This gun is just really fun. If you want to use it, use Express Charger and use Hypercore. But don't use it if you're actually trying. It's not good at all. The beam kind of spins around in a weird wonky style, but it's still pretty fun if you want to try it. Alright, so that's the tier list. Just to recap real quick, S tier we have Core. A plus tier is PDW for PvE and Advocate for PvP. A tier is Scrapper. It's just a close range version of the Core. Basilisk is the other option for a 500. Karma if you want to save up for an 800. And Gorgon if you don't like the PDW for PvE. In B tier we have Lacerator, which is just kind of a worse 200 than the other two I've mentioned, Core and Scrapper. Brute, which is just a worse version of the Advocate. It can be used if you prefer it, but I would just say use the Advocate over it. And then Detonator, which is pretty good for Alpha, and that's about it. Hunt, it's also good for, but you're going to get both in one game anyway. So I would just suggest the Karma over it. And then in C tier we have Arbiter, Comrade, Manticore, Shattergun Guarantee. Arbiter's only good if you can hit every single shot with it. If you can't, then just use the Basilisk. The Comrade is not good at all, don't use that. The Manticore is okay if you want to face shove. The Shattergun is okay if you want to dive on them. It's more of a fun gun, so don't really use it tryhard. And the Guarantee is the best for soloing Laser Drill. If you need to solo Laser Drill, have it on your loadout. And then we have F tier, which I already just went over. Fletchet, Bolty, Longshot, Phasic, Maelstrom, Haze, Carla, Zeus. The loadout I would suggest to run, get into that. I guess I'll go over the pistols. In the pistol category, K2A and Hammer basically do the same exact thing. The K2A is way more DPS by like 100. 314 to like 192, I think. 228, sorry. Not without double shot. And with the K2A, I would suggest the K2A. It's probably the best pistol right now. Run full auto and hollow point. Both increase your DPS. On Hammer, if you want to run it, run improved hollow nut, internal dampener, or hollow point. These are the only two pistols I would ever recommend. Do not run the Bulldog or the Scarab. They just don't do enough. For your loadout, I would suggest K2A, Core for your PvP. If you don't like it, switch it out for Scrapper. PDW, if you don't like it, switch it out for Gorgon for your PvE weapon. And then Advocate. And if you prefer having like a sniper, then run Basilisk. That's what I would suggest. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the tier list for release 12.1. And I hope you enjoyed.